Hello, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Professors in the AI Era, a webinar for transforming marketing communication. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Paul Cotter, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Stukent. I'm so excited to be here with you today. As we begin, I want to encourage you to use the chat feature. Go ahead and start by sharing where you're from, what courses you're currently teaching, and if you have any questions throughout the event, feel free to type them in the chat. Our amazing team is standing by to answer your questions in real time throughout the event. If you can't stick around for all of today's sessions, don't worry. We plan to share the recording with every attendee along with any of the links and resources that were shared throughout today's event. We will also have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And this goes without saying, but please be respectful and polite when commenting. So it looks like we have Jennifer from Omaha. Let's see, Azmat from Kyrgyzstan. Wow, we're international today. Cecilia is teaching marketing and she's in Colorado. Debbie from the University of Montana. Welcome. Colleen from California. There's lots coming through here. Laura from Michigan. VP from Tampa, Florida, teaching journalism. Wow. Dennis from Walla Walla, Washington, teaching marketing and design. Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you with us today. At Stukent, our mission is to help you, help your students, help the world. And to kick things off, I'm so excited to introduce Stukent's CEO and founder, Stuart Draper. He's here to share just a few thoughts with us today.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you all for being here, for taking time out of your busy schedules to sharpen your saws. That's why you come to these events that we host. And we host these events for just that purpose. We want to help you. Like Paul said, our mission, help educators, help students, help the world. That's why we're here with you today. And that's why our speakers are willing to give of their time and expertise and share the things that they're learning about AI. We're all learning still. And the mission, like I said, is help educators, help students, help the world. Our slogan, some of you may not know, is stay current. Today's event is one of those where we can definitely help you stay current as you learn more about AI. I tell people that people that were concerned about students using calculators for math are the same people that are concerned today about students using AI. AI is not going away. AI will always be in the palm of your hand, just like a calculator is now always in the palm of our hands. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for what you do for your students, and it'll be fun to see you next time.
Thank you, Stu. It's always great to hear from you. Before we begin, I want to show a quick video that highlights Stukent's mission and some of our course offerings.
At Stukent, our mission is to help you, help students, help the world. We're not a publisher. We're your partner in creating effective, engaging learning experiences for your students. According to a recent study, more than 55% of undergraduate students struggle to remain engaged in their coursework. And less engagement means students may leave your classroom without mastering the material. To combat falling engagement rates, 81% of students want you to include applicable real work students with formative feedback, but they help you identify areas of weakness to address through additional mentorship and coaching. From introductory business courses to marketing principles, public speaking, and more, Stukin offers over 30 simternships for the marketing, business, accounting, and communication fields. Each simternship pairs with a digital courseware, a full curriculum designed for educators by educators. Our courseware combines an annually updated text for students with hundreds of instructional resources for you. You get auto-graded quizzes, detailed lesson plans, engaging activities, case studies, and more, giving you time to focus on the aspects of your job you love the most. Whether that's working side by side with your students in class, conducting research to advance your field, or consulting other professionals and organizations in your industry, your simternship and courseware enable you to do more each day. All Stukin materials integrate into LMS platforms like Canvas, Moodle, and now D2L Brightspace, which helps you take the hassle out of course management. Plus, you don't have to be tech support for your students. Our customer success managers and support provide world-class technical support to get you and your students back to the business of learning fast.
Okay, so one of the things that I love so much about this internship experience is that it gives such a great and accurate real-world experience to my students.
Students will learn real-world experience that they can apply in their job.
To learn more about our cutting-edge simternships and courseware, schedule a walkthrough with a Stukin course consultant today. Together, we can help students help the world.
Now, as a special gift for you today, we want to offer you free instructor access to any of our Stukin courseware and simulations. With instructor access, you'll be able to preview the entire courseware, including lesson plans, assignments, lecture slides, and more. So go ahead and click on the link that's on your screen right now for this free instructor access. While you're doing that, I'm also excited to announce that ProfCon 2024 will be held in Salt Lake City, Utah, June 12th through the 14th. ProfCon is an in-person conference that brings you the latest trends and best practices in the marketing, communication, and business industries. Learn, prepare, and share with like-minded professors, exchange strategies, discover new teaching methodologies, and network with your peers. ProfCon is open for registration, and we're still accepting speaker applications. So click the link on your screen to find out more about ProfCon. Now, I'm excited to introduce Radhika Duggal and to welcome her to the stage. Radhika is the Chief Marketing Officer at Super.com and has extensive experience in highly regulated industries, such as healthcare and financial services. She is an adjunct professor of marketing at New York University, authored the Stukin Consumer Behavior courseware, and helped shape the consumer behavior simulation. Throughout her career, she has led the design and execution of innovative brand strategies to drive awareness and consideration through multi-channel marketing efforts. Welcome, Radhika.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Paul, for that really kind introduction.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We're so excited to have you with us. I'm going to turn the time over to you right now. We're in the background. If you need anything, just holler, but we'll turn the time over to you. And then when you're finished, I'll hop back on and we'll do a Q&A.
That sounds perfect. And two things. Number one, Paul and the Stukin team are never in the background. They're always in the foreground being incredibly helpful. So I know that I've had the pleasure of working with Paul and the Stukin team since 2018 and just really, really appreciate you all. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of these thoughts with everyone, but also thank you for everything you've done for my students for the past several years. The second thing I'm going to say before I dive right in is I live on the second floor in an apartment in New York City. So I am so sorry. Oh, and by the way, there's a hospital and a fire station within 1 block, which is great for safety, less great for noise. And in fact, there's an ambulance right now. So I'm just going to apologize in advance if you can hear any of that Please forgive me. All right. Outside of that, I'm so excited to be able to take the next, call it, 40 or 45 minutes with each of you to talk a little bit about something I know we all as educators think about every day. And that's really, how do we manage in this world of changing education and changing AI? The first thing I wanted to do is just finish up a quick introduction. So I have had the good fortune of being able to be an educator and a marketer. In my current role, as Paul mentioned, I work at a company called Super.com. Super.com is an e-commerce and fintech company that focuses on helping everyday folks earn money, save money, and build credit. I've had the opportunity to work across big Fortune 100 companies like you see on the screen, and also have had the opportunity to work as a management consultant for about the first third of my career. And I get the pleasure of taking that breadth of kind of very different work experience into my classroom. And I teach primarily at the NYU Stern School of Business, which is where I also was an undergrad. The last thing I'll say before we dive into what are we going to talk about in the context is please interrupt me. Please put questions in the chat. If I talk at you for the next 45 minutes, it is not going to be nearly as exciting as if we talk to each other. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the world around us. The reality is we all believe and know AI is changing how we teach our students. But what we teach them and our objectives are still exactly the same. My goal, and I'm very sure many or most of your goals, is still to enable our students to excel at the discipline in which they are focused on. So for me, I teach primarily consumer behavior. My goal is to make sure every one of my students walks out of my classroom, whether digitally or virtually or in person, and really understands how to apply those concepts to a real life situation. And that's a little bit about what I want us to talk about today. How do we enable students to take what they learn in our classrooms and apply that into the real world? And the reality is, if you have that as the goal, there are a lot of ways to teach to achieve that goal that AI doesn't really disrupt. And we're going to cover a couple of them today. So what are we going to do in the next 45 minutes? I really would like us to use the time to have a conversation with each other. I've got, 45 slides prepared or something like that. But please, the goal is to take everybody's collective experience. We learn better together, and use that to really write the rule book or the roadmap for how we can enable students to learn what we are there to teach them and apply them and prepare them for the world in which they'll have to apply those concepts. Okay. So you can see our agenda for today. This is really meant to be interactive. So again, the first thing I want to do is actually just talk a little bit about what are we afraid of in this AI driven world. I hear all sorts of things, and I got to admit, as AI evolves and changes and impacts my day job, I do think a lot about how that's going to impact my students, how we interact in the classroom, and how they're going to land up in their first or second jobs, or maybe they're later in their careers, and how they'll teach or how they'll work in the working world. So I want to talk about the things that worry us. Then I want to talk a little bit about some potential solutions. I got 3 to offer, and then dive into some Q&A. All right, let's get started. So these are some of the things that I hear when I talk to other professors about what keeps you up at night when you think about AI. A lot of it's focused around plagiarism and college essays not being a viable way of wrapping up your thoughts. What do others hear? Do others hear something similar? Do others hear something different? This is the moment where you don't want me to talk at you the whole time. I would love anyone else's opinion or feedback, either in the chat or verbally. Oh, tough crowd on a Friday morning. There we go. Yeah, that's right. Students won't learn the basic writing skills if they use AI. AI may make them lazy. They won't think for themselves. If students, this is right. If students don't analyze what they get from AI tools, then they think everything that AI says is right. Yeah, yes, you're right. Writing is a way to learn concepts. And in fact, I still have to write things out by hand in order to really internalize things. AI will overtake humanity. Oh yeah, we could use some humanity in the world today. So I hope AI doesn't overtake it any more than it already has. They need to learn what to ask AI. I think what Grace said is really smart. I think what you all said is really smart. But what Grace said I think is really interesting, which is, listen, this isn't going to be about the idea that, we got to stymie or stop students from using AI as, quite frankly, an educational tool. But it's how do we design lessons and curriculum and projects where they learn core critical thinking skills, as Jillian said. They learn how to use AI as a tool, and they learn how to critically think or fact check AI, because I know from experience, AI is not always right. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. Like, what are some practical ways we can do that? All right. So, but our goal is still the same. What I want to get to is I want us to talk about a couple of strategies to make sure that students can apply the concepts they learn, maybe using AI as a tool and learning, how do they think critically of the AI response? How do they apply the AI response? But how do we get them to think critically and apply what they learn in the classroom with or without AI? And what are the types of teaching tools that can enable that? So I've got 3 that I want to talk about. And we're going to spend the bulk of the time talking a little bit about the first one, which is how do you team up with a company as a professor, quite frankly, and give students a real life example of a problem to solve? How does AI help in that situation? And how does it not help in that situation? The second is student internships. My course, which is consumer behavior, and my text has a internship. It is great. I am slightly biased. I realize this. So take that for what it's worth. But I use it in my own class. And I've got some exec MBAs who are quite the high bar. And they confirm, unless they're just blowing smoke, that they confirm that it actually is quite helpful and a great way to apply what they've learned to a real life scenario, and in a low stakes real life scenario, quite frankly, and then real life case studies. All right. So before I delve into kind of like what is this company challenge, what I wanted to talk a little bit about was just the backdrop for this. So in 2023, so this past summer, I had the opportunity to use a company challenge in my consumer behavior class. It's the first time I had used it for an exec MBA audience in the format of being in person and being able to bring in folks from the company like into the classroom. So I wound up partnering with this gifting company, and they didn't want to be named as part of this. So we're going to call them Company X sometimes. You'll hear me refer to them that way. And they put forth a challenge that we worked together to enable the students to help to solve. So just for context, what they were trying to figure out is they had this evolving core customer base. What they wanted to do is think about, my customer base is this. I want it to change to this. And this was something like very different than it was today. And they wanted to get some smart students to put some thought into, if you change your customer base as a whole, how does that impact product? How does that impact marketing? And how does that impact operations? And that's all consumer behavior. If you change the consumer, how does the behavior of the new consumer impact the actual business? That, by the way, is like a real life challenge they were and still are facing. I can tell you, I have been down that road more than once in my day job. And while I can speak at my students and tell them, yeah, I use the consumer behavior principles that are in the textbook that we write about and that we talk about in class every day, getting them to actually experience that goes much further. So that's essentially what this company wanted to do. They realized, this company, Company X, they realized that they essentially wanted to switch customer bases because they were in an incredibly competitive landscape. And quite frankly, everyone was targeting their current existing customer. Nothing they said was differentiated. And they thought if they could switch customer bases, there might be a gap in the market that they could solve. What they did have going into it was a clear understanding of who that new customer they wanted to target was. They had a one-page design target that had quantitative data on demographically who were those customers, behaviorally who were those customers, and psychographically who were their customers. And what my students had to do is partner with the business that had this problem through a collaborative learning process, really helped them understand how they could use consumer behavior principles to determine what would change if you went this new direction from a product perspective, a marketing perspective, and an operations perspective, and then give them suggestions on how to do that. So just for context, the company was this gifting company. They wanted to, as I mentioned before, upgrade their customer base, really change who they targeted. And they wanted to do that so that they could differentiate. But that's a huge whole company strategy shift. And they just wanted some smart thinking from a number of folks, quite frankly, who were in that new design target before they made the shift. This, by the way, is what they had. So they came to the students with this page filled out with very clear quantitative data. Who is my design target demographically, behaviorally, and psychographically? There's an example of this page, by the way, in the consumer behavior student textbook. You can see this filled out with real data from a different company. This company, though, we wanted to protect their privacy and didn't want to share. What they also had, and this is illustrative data, what they also had done is they had made sure the market was sizable. So they shared with the class this other resource that's basically like, this is how big the total addressable market is. They wanted to just demonstrate to the students that they had a big market of folks who could be marketed to and who this new product would appeal to. Okay, so this was the challenge. Company X wanted to partner with the NYU student behavior, consumer behavior class to understand how to create a new strategy across marketing, product, and operations that aligns with their needs of their target, their design target. That whole project is based on an understanding of consumer behavior. And what the students did is draw on their understanding of the principles they learned in class to give real advice to some of the executives in the company. Now listen, like, why did they do this? Well, they did it for, why did the business or the company do this? Like, I'm someone who works at a small company as well, and time is so precious. So as a professor, how did I make the case to the CEO that it was worth his team's time? Number one, it was the CEO was an alum of the school, so that helped. Number two, I knew him personally, and make an effort as a professor to cultivate relationships with 5 to 7 sort of CEOs of smaller companies, so that for this exact reason, so that I can bring them into the classroom. But also what's important, what I found was important is I clearly was able to lay out what is the time commitment I need from your employees, including you, and what exactly are the tasks we need them to perform. That clarity up front was really helpful to get the company on board. The other things that were helpful was the students in the classroom were actually a design target. So if you all are thinking about doing this, thinking about a company where the students are the design target or the students are the core customer for the company is actually quite helpful. And the last was the company was at this place where they were making this big change, and it was a big deal for them. So having that extra minute to take a step and be thinking about it was important. I just wanted to check the comments. Great resources, that makes sense. And I totally agree with you, Jamie. What you said, be willing to disrupt your company every 10 years rather than someone disrupting it for you. I almost wonder, and we could have a very long conversation about this somewhere else, in the context of my current company, geez, I feel like it's every 10 minutes sometimes. But I hear you. If you aren't the disruptor, someone will disrupt you. So the reality of this is, the point of this is you, Sean, to your point, you cannot use AI to do this project for you. And that is the whole point of this. All of our fears that AI is going to kind of take over how students learn, it's not possible with this prompt. And that's what this is trying to get at. And I'll show you why. So logistically, this is what happened. We divided the classroom into 5 teams of 5. Each team took an area of focus. They did an audit of the customer experience. So Sean, to your point, where's the AI? It's not. You literally cannot use AI to go and buy the product. You literally cannot use AI to call customer service, record it, and talk about your experiences. You can use it in improvement opportunities, which I think is perfectly fine. And we had a number of students do that. But if you're actually using the proprietary financials of the company, which they were able to provide, and you're actually auditing the customer experience and going through and screenshotting your experience, you kind of can't do that. And then we asked for each of 3 company executives, the head of product, the head of marketing, and the head of operations, to team up and donate 1 hour throughout the course of the semester with each of these teams to talk to them and answer any questions. ChatGPT or AI can't actually do this for you. And I know, Sean, it sounds like you have a different perspective, so I'd actually love to hear about that. I'm going to stop talking and see if you'd like to share. Maybe you'll join us later, which is totally fine. The reality is you can ask AI to do that. You can talk to AI about different ideas, but hey, Paul, can you help us turn on audio? I would love to get Sean's perspective. Let's see if the Stukent team can help us turn on audio. There we go. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I invited Sean on stage.
Perfect. Sean, I think you should be able to turn on your audio. Sean, I'm going to give you another couple of seconds. Otherwise, ping us in the chat when you're ready, and I would really love to include your perspective. Oh, that's so frustrating. Paul, are you able to work with Sean offline, and maybe we can grab his perspective in a couple of minutes? We have a bit of time. So
Sean's should be on now.
Hello?
Excellent. Hi, Sean.
Hello?
Hi.
Okay.
Go for
Hey,
it, Sean.
When you
Echo here.
when Radhika, when you're not talking, if you mute, it'll take the echo away.
Are we good now? Okay. I saw several places in there I would be using AI. So at the very beginning, they had all this proprietary data. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of companies out there that are using that kind of data to create a pseudo focus group. Because, the machine's really good at simulating audiences, to simulate, it's sort of an avatar. So if you start with all that data about the customer and everything, that was the first thing I saw, is that I would create an avatar and I'd be talking to the machine about as a person or as a, as a segment. But then you had all the rest of the stuff like transcription and that kind of thing. So, there's an awful lot of people who are using the machine to collect audio data and then asking the machine to transcribe and then summarize the conversations. And in essence, you can automate quite easily a content analysis of the kinds of customer service inquiries and conversations. So I don't know. I listened to it all and went, well, I'd automate that. I'd automate that. I'd automate that. I don't know.
I'm going to go back on off mute. I hear you, Sean. I think what you're saying makes sense if you are in an actual business. And for example, in my current role, we do actually a lot of what you're saying, but we have reams of data then, and we have reams of customer service calls. There is a privacy issue with that. But for these students are taking this class and they're like calling customer service once or twice, right? Or they are looking at the Google data for a snapshot in time. And while you can, and we do this in my day job, automate big sets of data, what we're giving the students is really a snapshot of the data, or at least what the company was willing to give the students was a snapshot of the data. But I hear you. I think you're totally right. If you have more data or a company is willing to share more data, it's absolutely a great place to start. So I wanted to share with you all the outcome. And what I wanted to share was just an example of one of the decks that these students groups created. And Sean, I think if you do come back, like have the opportunity to come back and share, I'd also love to continue getting your or others' perspective on where you might use AI, given the data that you have. I think the key to this is these students were taking this over an 8-week session. It's about a half a semester is the right way of thinking about this. And we were giving them just enough data to actually spend the time really trying to dig in and analyze. So what they were asked to do is share the problem description, the design target, which we gave them. And then we asked them to go channel by channel and analyze what the customer experience was. And then take the consumer behavior principles they learned in class and share the principle. So think Maslow's hierarchy of needs or the Bain & Company values pyramid. Share from their channel analysis and their time pretending to be a customer, what did they observe, and share their recommendations. Just want to walk you through what this looks like. I assure you, it's really interesting. I asked several times if the students, and there were only about 25 of them, but if any of the students were using AI to complete the project in any meaningful way, and they did. And I wonder if there were a couple of reasons for that. There's no big data sets here. It's a physical product, which I think is really interesting. They got to order the physical product. So they like actually physically receiving something was a really important experience. And we should go from that. Okay, so there's a problem description that they created. This was the data, like an illustrative example of that data set. And then what they did is they did a channel assessment. So they basically went and they came up with their assessment of each of the different channels that the company used. In some places, they simply absorbed visually what the company was doing. And in some cases, they were given reviews data by the company, but again, not huge data sets. They were given the search and web data in chart form like this. This is literally a screenshot. So they're giving sort of like PDFs of select charts, and they were able to simply like look up different press hits. From there, they came up with a number of different observations and really dug in and just tried to figure out like, how do we improve or drive value in various phases of the marketing funnel? Where the consumer behavior principle really came into action was they essentially were asked, identify a number of opportunity areas, talk about why, based on the design target slide that resonates with the design target, identify the consumer behavior principle that you talked about in the class session and that came straight from the textbook, and then share with us your recommendation. And they had to identify 4 opportunity areas. And all of the slides essentially look like this, mimic this. The idea here is to tie the consumer behavior principle to a real world problem that the company is facing, that the customer is facing, and come up with a recommendation. So I'll share with you an example that I thought was really interesting. They spent a lot of time really deeply trying to understand what impacts the consumer's desire to buy. And they didn't use AI, to my knowledge. They simply went and they looked influencer by influencer. And maybe they used AI to ask who's the best influencer for this space. But what they really then did is they contacted these influencers. I have the transcript of their conversations with these folks. And they asked them, why does this work? What do you think that you do would actually impact this design target? And they spent time actually talking to people. Sean's right. Like AI works here too. You could, simply ask Google and Google's version of ChatGPT, like, who are the best influencers in this space? But that doesn't make up for actually having the conversation, leveraging the conversation in the recommendation and the richness of the recommendation that comes out of that. There's a couple of more too. So I'm just going to pause on this. There are a number of opportunity areas that the students went through. I'm going to pause on this. Does this generally make sense? The key themes here are make sure you get the company to be involved, make sure you get real data, and make sure there's enough of it that the students can use it without feeling like they need to go to external sources. And by the way, if they do go to external sources, that's fine. Like using AI is absolutely fine, but AI is not going to do the work of marrying the company data, your own analysis, and the consumer behavior principles that are sort of written out in the textbook. I think that that's right too. And I think what's good about this is they get that foundational understanding of the principles from the lectures and from the textbook. Then they got the the foundational understanding of the company from the members of the company that came and spent time in the classroom and spent time answering follow-up questions. So I completely understand and agree with what you're saying. I think because there weren't huge data sets and because they had that understanding quite intentionally, using AI was maybe more time consuming than not. The next piece here is I wanted to jump from talking about the presentation to talk a little bit about student internships. And now I know you all heard the kind of upfront video and internships were mentioned, but I wanted to share a little bit about how, again, this is a great way to apply what folks learn in the classroom and in a textbook to a real world situation. And again, you're in the moment in a timed session in a simulation. So you're not necessarily asking AI what it would do. So what these internships are essentially a simulation that enables students to create or think through real world decisions in the moment. And what I like about these is they're actually time constrained. So what I typically do is I have students, let's go to this slide. We've created enough kind of material that wrap around the digital experience that as a professor, I take the time to introduce the topic or the subject in the classroom. We talk about what is the purpose of this internship, what is the purpose of each round of this internship as they're divided into 5 or 7 or 10 rounds, depending on this internship. So we take the time to set up that round. What is the goal of this? What are you going to learn? And what data is provided? Then they launch into actually playing this internship. Most of the time, I tend to teach this by giving folks 30 to 45 minutes per round in a small group together. So folks go experience the digital product, even if it is a virtual class. They hop into breakout rooms. They're working through this internship problems together. An example of this, the consumer behavior one, is built on a company called Buoy. They sell bags. And Buoy is essentially trying to create a new version of its messenger bag and market that. And essentially what the internship does is it poses consumer behavior focused questions throughout the evolution of the Buoy team, of which our students are pretending to be part of. It poses consumer behavior questions to folks as they are making marketing decisions. And it's quite effective. I've now been running a version of this. It's gotten updated a couple of times since maybe 2020 with students. And because it's a 30-minute exercise, because they're in their groups discussing, I would make this choice or this choice, because there's real data given in the form of PDFs in this digital internship, they really focus on using the data they have instead of going and asking or thinking, how do I train an AI model to read or ingest this data? There's enough to get the point across for how you analyze the data in the context of the theory, but not too much, such that you can't get through it. And then we have a class discussion. And typically professors are given a number of different discussion questions for each round of this internship. And that works really nicely. What it enables is, if you have 7 or 8 rounds of a internship or simulation, whether you ask students to do it in person or not in person, in groups or not in groups, you're able to test an understanding and the practical application of that understanding of that theory in multiple scenarios. And even my most advanced students, so I was doing this with my exec MBAs over the summer, even they who are in a job while they are doing school on the weekends, even they appreciate the ability in a low stakes environment, which is what they typically call this, to test out how do you apply what I've learned. They don't want to test it out in their real job initially because they want the time and the ability and the space to get it wrong or to get it right, to learn from it and then go apply it into their actual jobs. I'm going to pause on this one. Do folks have questions on this? I really think the purpose of this is give students bite-sized learning for how to apply the concepts. And then the last is real world case studies. So one of the things I like to do quite frequently is create 20-minute discussions about something that's actually happening that day. So in March of this year, we all sort of know Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. I think March 10th was the Friday where this happened. I then had class that Saturday. And so what I typically do is I create slides around the most current event I can think of that has a marketing and a consumer behavior implication. Draft applicable questions and just host a discussion about it. The key here is making sure that you come with any sort of article or data, you're able to ask questions around the topic or the theory you're trying to get across. For me, it was, in this scenario, how did the consumers or customers in question, which were the executives at startups, how did they behave? And how do you tie that back to the consumer behavior theory in the textbook? We applied that quite a lot to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The SVB folks were really a victim of the executives' kind of need for safety, keeping their money safe. And we hosted a discussion based on that. That is a laptops down. Here's a real scenario that's happening as we speak. And let's have a conversation about how what you learned actually applies. So this is also something that, yeah, you can ask AI to like do this in hindsight, but in the moment as it's happening, it's quite hard. And if you're looking for topics to think through this on, hey Jarrett, no worries to be late to join, not a big deal at all. If you're looking for topics to think about current events on, one of the best ways to do this, the Wall Street Journal has a roundup. Every Friday morning, they send out essentially a list of articles. You get to pick the discipline that you teach. I teach marketing typically, so I get a marketing roundup. But if you teach another topic, they'll shoot that along too. And this is a great example of incredibly timely and current events. You can share out that document or that Wall Street Journal article in part of your discussion group, especially if many of your students have access. But then you can take the time in the classroom to ask students to put themselves in the shoes of the executives of the company. Connect your discussion to the principals in class and simply have the conversation that way. So listen, what we've talked about are a couple of different opportunities or options of ways to realize that AI can be part of the learning or the analysis journey, but the more we can offer students a snapshot of the principles, but most importantly, focus on how they apply those principles, whether through a partnership with a company trying to solve a real world challenge, whether through a simulation or a internship, or whether through real world case studies and discussion that we have together in the classroom. The more we can have those conversations, the more we're still able to hit the same goals we've always been charging towards, which is enabling students to learn and apply what they've learned outside of the classroom. All right, I don't have any more prepared slides, so I'm really interested in your thoughts or questions or just the discussion. Naomi, you absolutely could ask ChatGPT for things to discuss in class.
Radhika, this is great. Thank you. I noticed there, okay, there we go. I noticed a little echo. Thank you. This is awesome. We want to give people a chance to chat in some more questions. We know there's lots of questions with this. We have a couple already. While we're doing that, I appreciate that you talked about the consumer behavior simternship. And we want to also throw up a featured action here where we're going to offer everyone free instructor access to Radhika's consumer behavior courseware. So go ahead and click on the link that's on your screen now. You can check out the courseware and the simulation in its entirety that she was just talking about. You can see the lesson plans, the lecture slides, sample syllabus, everything that Radhika has created for this. So go ahead and feel free to do that. I am going to jump in right now with a couple of questions that we had throughout the event. The first one, Radhika, is, do you have ideas for homework assignments to make them learn how to use AI critically? And that was from VP.
Yeah, so actually one of the things we do in my class is, as an outcome of the work that they do with the company, we ask the students in their groups to write one blog post for the company. This helps the company as they're trying to like share that they're a good corporate citizen, they work with the university, etc. It also enables students to share their perspective. And so I always encourage the students to actually try to use AI to write the blog post. What's interesting about that is when they do it, what they find is the blog post, typically the AI focused blog post, comes back with some very basic level stuff about what the company is. It doesn't come back with the richness of what's the problem we're trying to solve, what's the data that was given, what was the in-person conversation that was had, etc. So there's actually a lot of value in challenging students to use AI because of the lesson that what you get back is the bones might be interesting, but the content doesn't have the richness of the conversations you've had or the internal data that you're given.
Okay.
Another question we have:
How do you introduce students to AI as a tool?
Paul, I didn't hear you. I'm going to go off. I'm going to go on mute.
How do you introduce students to using AI as a tool?
So one thing I'll say is at this point, nobody, and you all will tell me if you think differently, I have not had to introduce the tool of AI to my students. They all know what it is and are using it actively. What we often talk about, though, is how do you prompt AI? How do you actually provide it with enough context to give you a helpful and useful answer? Then how do you take the bones of what you get and add the actual context for either the challenge you're solving? How do you fact check? How do you ensure that it is good content? At the end of the day, one of the ways that we essentially used AI as part of this exercise is, and essentially it wasn't an introduction because every student in the classroom had been using it in their day job, but essentially ask them to make sure, listen, you are responsible to a person that works in this company that you are partnering with. So when you write your blog post, get your first draft from AI, see what that's like, but ensure that you feel good. And it was an executive, the chief product officer, the chief marketing officer, the chief operating officer in a company you may want to work in one day. Ensure that what you are handing them is actually the type of tool that you believe that is the best reflective of your work. And that as the introduction or the context tends to enable students to use AI if they choose to create the outline of something, but they very quickly start to fill it in much more aggressively with the experience they got doing the project and the work.
Okay. Where do you see
AI falling short?
We've talked a lot about this, I think, in the chat and in other spaces. Number one, fact checking. So what you get might not always be true. Number two, the richness of the thought and the data. You're going to get a lot more from sitting face to face with the head of operations of a company. And AI is not going to incorporate that analysis for you unless you've recorded the conversation, which you probably need to get permission for. And then you have fed it through into that. So it's not going to include all of the correct information or the richness of the conversation. And Bill, I just wanted to make sure we were getting what you talked about as well in the chat. I agree with you. It's a big project. What we did is, just to be clear, we asked students to pick one area of focus: operations, product design, or marketing. So that helped to limit the scope, but also didn't give them all of the data in the company. We gave them a little bit of time with the head of each function to kind of narrow down the scope. But I agree with you. It's a big project. And that was the point, though. Give the students something meaningful that'll actually impact the company's history and work. And that's how they wanted to work on it.
Okay. Another question is,
will AI take away from critical thinking?
I heard, will AI take away from critical thinking? I think over time that remains to be seen. I don't know the answer, But I think the reality is our job as educators is to teach students how to think critically in a world where AI exists. And that's a lot of the things we talked about. Fact check. Think about, does this make sense? Ensure all the right data sources. Even if you ask AI a question, you feed it a large language model, a big portion of data, ensure that that data actually makes sense in the context. And I think what is kind of the reality is critical thinking is a skill we're going to have to teach students with or without AI. AI is just another tool they need to learn to think critically about and with.
Okay.
So many students
are using AI,
and some job applications now ask how an applicant AI in their work. Are there best AI tools to show off to industry leaders or hiring managers?
So this one's a little bit outside of the realm in which I either work or teach. So I'd open that up to the group and see if anybody has an answer around this.
While we're waiting,
Chadden,
I'm going to
ask another related question. This one says, since you are an industry expert, do you look for AI skills with new hires out of college?
I do. And what we do at super.com is we essentially ask folks to do a case study. And the case study is related to their field and their discipline. And one of the things we've started to look for is, number one, did they use AI as part of that project or that case study response or answer? And number two, if they did they tell us they used it? Because hiding it's not that helpful. And number three, how did they then augment what the AI provided to them with their own thinking? I think the reality is we got to learn to take advantage of the tools that exist and help us in our day jobs, but testing for that skill and that knowledge becomes really critical.
Are there things that you would caution students against while using AI?
Absolutely. So I think I would very clearly caution students against using AI and dusting their hands and saying, here's the output. This is a lot of the same stuff. As we teach folks, we still have to help them understand that they've got a QA and fact check. They have to ask the right questions. And they've got to make sure we as professors, assuming we're not giving them projects or prompts that they can simply run through a large language model, we've got to make sure that we are giving them enough of a complex project to answer. And that's why I shared something with like such richness and such complexity, so that they can't just go ahead and ask AI. So I think part of this is making sure that we are helping them learn how to use the tool. But the other part is we've got to do our part to give them the content and the project material and the learning opportunities that sort of simulate the real world work environment, because you can't, there's some things that you can ask AI for, but most of the complex work you cannot.
Okay, well, Radhika,
that's the questions that we have. So I just want to thank you once again for joining us today, for all your hard work in putting this presentation together.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for the questions.
If you enjoyed
today's event, I want to invite you to check out our upcoming events and webinars. We have lots of events coming up, even events for your colleagues who teach supply chain courses. We're constantly adding more events to our calendar, so make sure you check out these events. And there's a prompt that should be coming up on your screen right now. Thank you, Radhika, for making this webinar a success. Thanks to each one of you for joining us today. We appreciate your continued support. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, and remember to stay current with Stukent.